Welcome to another Pirkei Avot Shir. We're on chapter 5, about to start Mishna 7, and we dedicate this episode in memory of Levy Moshe Esther and Elisheva Yael Bat Levy, and also in memory of Nissim ben Reuven. And with that, I'm going to hand you over to Michael.
Thanks, Father Mashiach. So this Mishnah number 7, we're going to discuss 10 miracles that were performed or that occurred consistently in the Bet HaMikdash. It's quite a long Mishnah, so let's go through them now. 10 miracles were wrought for our forefathers in the sanctuary. Lo hapila isha mereach basar hakodesh. No woman ever miscarried from the aroma of the sacred sacrificial meat. V'lo hatzriach basar hakodesh me'olam. The sacred sacrificial meat never became putrid or went off. V'lo nu'a zavov bebet hamit b'chayim. No fly was ever seen in the slaughterhouse. V'lo ara kori lekohen gadol b'yom Kippurim. No nocturnal pollution ever occurred to the Kohen Gadol on the Yom Kippur. V'lo kibu hagashamim eish shel atzei hama'aracha. And the rains never put out the fire of the wood pile on the altar under the open sky. V'lo nitzacha haruach et amud ha'ashan, and the wind never overcame the column of smoke from the altar fire to deflect it or to diffuse it. V'lo nimtza pasul ba'omer u'vishtei alechem ol v'lechem hapanim, and nothing was ever found in the omer, the 2 loaves, or the showbread, to ritually disqualify them. Omdim tzufafim u'mishtachavim ravachim. When the people stood pressed together at the Beis HaMikdash, when they bowed down to prostrate themselves amid the ample room, they had room, even though they were pressed tightly. V'lo hizik nachash v'yakrav v'Yerushalayim me'olam. And never did a serpent or a scorpion injure anyone in Yerushalayim. V'lo omar adam l'chavero tzali hamakom she'olin b'Yerushalayim. And no man ever said to his fellow man, there is not room enough for me to sleep the night in Yerushalayim, presumably on their pilgrimages to Yerushalayim.
Yeah. And there was a tremendous amount of people. So can you imagine all those people finding a place to be comfortable in Yerushalayim it's like fitting a tremendous large object into a tiny space. It was for sure a miracle.
Yeah. What do we call a miracle? Seems to be like a once occurring event. But what was special about this situation is that they were regularly occurring. So they happened repeatedly, almost to the point of taking it for granted. So let's look at the Ruach Chaim's commentary on these 10 miracles as he covers them completely, as I've learned. So he regards, talking about the 10 miracles that were performed for our forefathers in the Beis HaMikdash. He says, the Beis HaMikdash was a microcosm of the upper spheres. Its structure and utensils served to aid and guide the Jewish people in their national mission of eradicating evil. Thus, the Mishna states that 10 miracles were performed for our forefathers in the Beis HaMikdash. For although many of those miracles did not directly affect people, they served to aid and guide them in their quest. So now he identifies all 10 of these miracles one by one. So the concept of no woman ever miscarried from the aroma of holy meat. He says, if a pregnant woman smells the odor of cooking food and develops a craving for it, she must be permitted to partake of it. We will allow her to eat even on Yom Kippur. For if this woman is denied, both she and the fetus might be in mortal danger. This we learn in Gemara Yoma 82 Omid Aleph. Normally, the pungent aroma of sacrificial meat roasting on the Mizbeach would have aroused a desire for meat in a pregnant woman, a desire that could not be satisfied. Nevertheless, no woman ever miscarried because of the aroma. These cravings are of a pregnant woman who they have insatiable cravings during pregnancy. This is what's being referred to. Rav Chaim continues. One may argue that one is exempt from studying Torah. Intensive study drains one's strength. This was discussed in Sanhedrin 26 on the base, and by nature will ruin his constitution. The miracle of the sacrificial meat teaches us that when a man is involved in the service of Hashem, he need not be concerned with the natural order of things. Just as Hashem suspends the natural consequence of an unrequited desire, he will suspend the natural consequence of intense Torah study. So we learn the lesson from this. He's teaching us no harm will befall a person engaged in fulfilling a mitzvah. And the second point, that the holy meat, the sacrificial meat, was never spoiled. He says, one who involves himself in holiness will be spared from decay. This miracle shows us that spoilage and rot are the products of sin. Sin causes a decay of Gehinnom, which exists even in man's lifetime. He merely is lacking the senses to detect the malodorous odor. So that's very interesting. And the third miracle was no fly was ever seen in the butchering area. So dead flies belittle the perfumer's oil. A little foolishness outweighs wisdom and honor. That's a quote. The evil inclination is like a fly which rests between man's desires. That quote originally was from Kohelet 10:1. Dead flies belittle the perfumer's oil. A little foolishness outweighs wisdom and honor. So it's comparing the fly to the Yetzer Hara. He continues, the butchering place in the temple was full of blood and raw meat, yet no fly ever approached. Similarly, the evil inclination is a pesky fly, but it cannot approach holiness. The Talmud expresses a similar idea concerning the prophet Elisha. From Malachim 11, we know that it says, I know that the prophet is a holy man, says the Shunammite woman. How did she know that he was holy? He never saw a fly pass over his table. The analogy of the fly's absence from the butchering area to fight against the evil inclination teaches us an important lesson about the tactics of the evil inclination. The Yetzer Hara is like a fly which rests between man's desires. This we learn in Brachot 61a. The Yetzer Hara usually attempts to manipulate man's base desires and provokes him to sin. If man refuses to commit an outright sin, it will then approach him from another side, from the side that desires to perform a mitzvah. For example, it might remind him that the higher spheres are much more susceptible to damage, and even the slight sin can cause severe harm. One who involves himself in Torah study and mitzvah observance is affecting the uppermost worlds, and even the slightest measure of self-serving motivation could cause tremendous damage. Therefore, it is better for an individual to avoid divine service completely. So, the Yetzer Hara seems to be trying to give people the jitters. They'll just avoid the divine service rather than perhaps spoiling something in the upper world. Is what Rav Chaim is saying, and he continues. The verse in Kohelet alludes to this approach. Dead flies belittle the perfumer's ointments. We learned. What's that? The fly in the ointment.
Yes,
it's exactly what this is referring to. Dead fly, the evil inclination attempts to dissuade man from the perfumer's oil, which is the service of Hashem. But how can it succeed in belittling the value of Torah and mitzvot in man's eyes? Because the evil inclination utilizes trickery. It reminds man that a little foolishness outweighs wisdom and honor. That is, a minor sin is very severe when a man operates in the upper spheres of wisdom and honor. Wisdom and honor represent Torah and mitzvot. So how do we combat this tactic? If man is considering a particular action, he must first calculate whether he expects any personal gain from this approach. If he does not anticipate any personal gain, he can assume that it is truly is a mitzvah. This is the lesson of the analogy of the Beis HaMikdash butchering place. The service there was hardly glamorous. Yes, it was performed by the Kohanim, the aristocracy of the nation, the family chosen to serve Hashem. Such service definitely did not bring any honor or enjoyment to those who performed it. This was the place where no fly could be found, for it was the source of pure service. And Rav Chaim continues with the next miracle, which was the Kohen Gadol did not experience a keri, which is an emission on Yom Kippur. This emission is not a sin per se. It is a punishment for having improper thoughts during the day. The Yom Kippur service could only be performed by the Kohen Gadol. If he would disqualify himself from the service, it would be obvious to all that he had become impure through this keri, therefore unfit to serve. Even if he indeed deserved the punishment, Hashem spared him the public shame that would result from it. The next miracle that occurred was the rain did not extinguish the fire of the arranged wood on the Mizbeach. Rav Chaim says, rather than simply withholding rain from that particular spot, Hashem caused rain to fall there. Nevertheless, he did not allow the fire to be extinguished. The fire of the Mizbeach represented divine service. Just as the fire continued to burn despite the onslaught of the elements, we too are expected to maintain our divine service in spite of the vicissitudes of life. Many people excuse their laxity in Torah study by claiming that their overwhelming financial pressures do not allow them time for anything else. This is a grave error. If a person would but trust Hashem to provide sustenance, he could study Torah without financial pressure. The miracle of the pyre alluded to this concept as well. Rain represents sustenance, as we learn in Tanis 2b, and fire represents Torah. As the verse states in Yirmiyahu 23:29, my words are like fire, says Hashem. The rain did not extinguish the fire of the Mizbeach, so too we must not allow financial concerns to extinguish our commitment to Torah study. Rav Chaim continues regarding the wind, the ruach, that did not overwhelm the column of smoke. The wind, the ruach, represents the evil inclination, which is called the spirits of impurity. The column of smoke symbolizes a set schedule of Torah study. Just as the wind did not disperse the column of smoke, so too the storm winds of the evil inclination cannot distract the Torah study of one who faithfully adheres a set schedule of Torah study. The column of smoke continues to rise, and I quote from Tehillim, righteous man will flourish like a date palm. Furthermore, and the next miracle was no disqualification was found in the Omer. This is referring to the bread that was the sacrificial bread that was produced. And Rav Chaim states, quoting Kesuvas 50a on Tehillim 106.3, fortunate are those who give charity at all times. How can one give charity at all times? This is a reference to one who provides for his children when they are young. Indeed, one can perform a mitzvah when he earns money, because he is raising funds that will be used for charitable purpose or feeding his young children. Even then, he must be careful to conduct his business honestly, in order that the mitzvah should be performed in a proper fashion. Hashem said, he said, offer to me the Omer on Pesach, that there will be a blessing on the grain. Offer to me the Shtei Halechem, the 2 loaves, on Shavuot, so there will be a blessing on the fruit. This we learn in Rosh Hashanah 16 Amud Aleph. The Zohar notes that as long as the Lechem Hapanim, the showbread, was placed upon the golden table in the Beis HaMikdash, there was never a shortage of bread amongst the Jewish nation. The flow of bounty and blessing was channeled through the golden table and dispersed to the entire nation. In summary, these 3 offerings represent the sustenance of the people. No disqualification was ever found in the offerings. but the nation was dependent upon them for their food supply. So too, we must ensure that no disqualification, no dishonesty should be found in our business practices. Regarding the Mishna statement, they stood crowded yet bowed with ample space. He says, straight posture is indicative of arrogance, whilst prostrating oneself is a sign of humility. This miracle indicated that when people were arrogant, they felt crowded. Once they humbled themselves, however, they felt as if there was ample space for everyone. And what does he say about no snake or scorpion ever caused any harm in Yerushalayim? He says, there was a place where a snake was terrorizing the populace. Rav Chanina ben Dosa heard of this and asked to be taken to the snake's lair. He placed his heel over the opening of the lair. The snake bit him and died. He brought this dead snake into the study hall and proclaimed, look, it is not the snake that kills, but it is sin that kills. This we learned in Barachot 33a. No man ever spent night in Yerushalayim in a state of sin. For the morning, the daily sacrifice would forgive any sins that were committed overnight, and the evening would forgive any sins that were committed during the day. This we learn in Midrash Bamidbar 21:19. Therefore, no snake ever harmed anyone in Yerushalayim, for everyone was free of sin. We could therefore spare ourselves the pain of natural disasters if we would merely perform Hashem's will. And the quotation, no man ever said to his friend, there is insufficient space for me to sleep in Yerushalayim. He says, people tend to believe that their competitors are the cause of their financial woes. This is a mistake. The amount of money a man is destined to earn is fixed at the beginning of the year. This we learn in Beitzah 16a. And no man can ever touch a hair's breadth of what is prepared for his friend. This we learn in Yoma 38b. No man ever felt that the competition for housing left him without shelter in Yerushalayim. So too, we must not assume that the competition is draining our resources. So that's from the Ruach Chaim. That's Rav Chaim of Volodin's commentary regarding the 10 miracles that occurred in the Beis HaMikdash. And that concludes Mishnah 7 of the 5th parak.
Fantastic, thank you so much, Michael. And with that, we're going to, next time we convene, we're going to move on to the 8th Mishnah, which is the 10 things that were created on Erev Shabbat, Ben Hashmashot. And that's something we can look forward to, B'ezrat Hashem. So with that, we wish you a wonderful and blessed week.